Judge, we've come to talking to you about your role as a federal district judge, and I know you spent 17 or 18 years on the bench there. I'd like to talk about some of the cases that you thought were the most important and some of the things that were most memorable to you. But let's start out with some of the restrictions that being a federal judge gave you. Tell me about the incident with the Rotary Club.
Well, the Rotary Club was an interesting development. Rotary did not have any black members, and there were pressures from many sources for Rotary to admit black. So ultimately, a decision was made that 4 or 5 black people would be admitted to Rotary, and I was one of those people. And the end result was, I started attending Rotary, went through the indoctrination program and all that. Then when my nomination came up for the federal district court, I was called by a female lawyer on the staff of then Senator Edward Kennedy, who chaired the Judiciary Committee. And she said, "We want to know, what are you going to do about Rotary?" And I said, "I don't know what you mean, because actually we were admitted to Rotary to integrate Rotary." She said, "That's no longer the question. Women are not admitted, and we want to know, what are you going to do?" And I'll leave you with this. The senator wants you to know, you tell us what you will do, and we'll tell you what we will do. So I called them back the next day and indicated to them that I would leave the Rotary Club, although I felt like Rotary was going in the right direction. She said, "That'll be fine, but here's the requirement. When you come for your confirmation hearing, you bring us a letter signed by you that you resigned from the Rotary Club, and why." I did that, and it passed.
That's ironic, and I think in later years, Judge Julia Gibbons was actually admitted to Rotary and became president of Rotary.
That is true.
So.
That is true.
You mentioned that many of the trials that you held were drug trials and criminal trials, but I know that you held a number of important civil trials too when you were on the district bench. Tell us a little bit about some of the ones that you think were more important.
Okay. Well, one of the really important cases was the Velsicol case, Woodrow Sterling versus Velsicol. Velsicol is a big manufacturer of chemicals in this area, and Velsicol's chemical disposal system somehow broke down, and Velsicol acquired a large tract of land near Toome, Tennessee, and started burying chemical waste in that area in 55-gallon drums, and at one point had buried more than 300,000 of those drums. And then some of it was buried in cardboard boxes. And the water in that area began to change, and people started noticing it didn't taste right, it didn't look right, folk were becoming ill. And so there were meetings by the state health officials. I think Dr. Fowinkle was in at that time, the chief health officer for the state, and they met at Bolivar, somewhere near Toome, and with Velsicol people, and the decision was made that an order would be issued that Velsicol would stop its dumping of waste in that area. And one of the reasons is the U.S. Geological Society had learned that this waste facility was right on top of an aquifer, and that made it even worse. Velsicol ignored the state, and the Sterlings sued. And we tried that case. It took a long time to prepare it for trial, because Velsicol wasn't ready for any trial. And they produced about 40 expert witnesses on each side, and it was just an arduous task. But we tried that case. It took 65 days in the courtroom to try that case. And that Mammoth case went up to the Court of Appeals. It was affirmed, But the Court of Appeals changed some of the damage awards that I had given, and one of them, I just thought that the Court of Appeals should not have changed, and that was it did not allow damages for post-traumatic stress syndrome. But that's one of them. Then another case was the state wanted to drain Reelfoot Lake because it said sediment had developed on the bottom of the lake, and the lake was filling up, and it was becoming uninhabitable for fish and that sort of thing. And they came in, and we had a massive hearing on this case, and I denied the state the right to drain Reelfoot Lake, about 17,000 acres. And I entered an injunction prohibiting them from doing so. And the reason was the state had not conducted an environmental impact study. So their theory was that rainwater eventually would fill it all up, but they admitted that a lot of eagles would probably eat themselves to death on fish. So I have heard since that some progress has been made as a result of that environmental impact study, and that it may well be that some of the water can come through a canal that can be cut from a river up there. Then another case involved what's called Porter Creek Watershed. Some man developed the idea he's going to develop about a 4,000-acre ranch in Hardman County, and he started doing the work. It was beautiful work, well done. But it turned out to be an inverse condemnation case because water was running from his place, the way he had contoured it, down on other people's property, which was rendering their use of the property valueless. And so I had to stop that. And the only time one of the times I'd been really worried is when I went to my mother's funeral. My sister says, there's a white man here who's waiting. He wants to see you. And I said, well, why would he want to do? She said, he won't say. And he just looked at me, and then he left. I later learned he was the brother of the man who started that case. And then more recently, there was a Waste Management Institute case at Emel, Alabama. And that case involved one of what was later called a premier burial site in this country for waste, because it had about a 700-foot depth of clay soil, and it was ideal for the disposal of waste. And the people who wanted to operate it bought it from 10 people here in this area, and they were contracted to pay them 12.5% of whatever was made, plus whatever they paid down. And it made so much money so fast that these people came up with a plan to try to break it, and it became a breach of contract case more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And so we tried that case. I entered a judgment for $100 million. It was settled at the Sixth Circuit Court level for, I think, about $90 million, because the presiding circuit judge says, how did this case get on our calendar? And I think you all should go and meet with our staff and work this out. Well, you know, it doesn't take but one direction like that to get you going.
That's right.
And that's what happens.
Pretty strong suggestion.
Yes. And there were others, but there's no use going through so many of them. But those are significant civil cases and required a great deal of study. It's amazing in the law how much you have to study and learn, yet forget when the case is over and go on to something else.
Judge, I had the honor of being one of your law clerks in 1983 and 84 in my first year out of law school. Tell me a little bit about how you picked your law clerks and any law clerks that you still might keep in touch with or have come to practice before you.
Well, of course, you are one of the law clerks that I am very proud of, because you have achieved so much. And you now work in the corporate world rather than the litigation world. But I also had learned somewhere along the way that you had been president of the Court of the Judiciary in this state. And so your achievements have been remarkable. And I don't think Judge Brown can claim all the credit for that. I think I'm entitled to claim a fair amount of the credit. Then some others, Judge Lonnie Thompson is in the circuit. He's in the General Sessions Court here. There's a Judge Nanette Baker who's been elected a circuit judge at St. Louis. My first law clerk, Ann Watson, she is an administrative law judge in San Francisco. And one of my law clerks heads the narcotics division of the United States Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. And then others have practiced with various firms and have done extremely well. And I'm very proud of them because so many of them were folk that, see, you were smart, but there were others who had to be helped along the way. And I kept one young woman 3 years simply to teach her how to write. She had knowledge. It's a question of expressing herself in a way that was legally acceptable. And she passed the bar and became a clerk for the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, I don't know what she's doing now, but she did very well. And I'm just pleased that most of my law clerks, some of them are with big law firms here now, and they've done very well, very well.
Well, being your clerk and having you as a mentor was certainly a big help with all that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you about the impact on your personal life of having become a judge on the federal bench. I know that I'd like to hear your views on the appointment of federal judges for life and whether you think that's good or bad and how it impacted your personal life to become a federal judge.
Well, the impact on your personal life is that it takes a great deal of time away from your family because you might try, for example, the Velsicol case, 65 days. All these other cases are stacking up behind. So you've got to start studying for the next case and the next case and the next case. So it's an ongoing process, and many times you do it on weekends, many times you do it at home. We had a case Judge Todd tried before me, before he became a judge, and it involved a Firestone 500 tire that exploded, and 3 young men were killed as a result of it. But there was drinking involved, and I learned something about jurors in Jackson and rural areas. If drinking gets involved in it, you got a long, hard way to go. And it takes a lot of time away from your family. And you have to concentrate so much on trying to stay up with the law and sometimes hoping you are interpreting it right when you may or may not be. And then law clerks are very helpful to you because in my case, as you recall, I preferred to have law clerks do all of the case workups in an order form. And then I did not have to start from scratch unless I had a reason to do so. And that helped me significantly in moving some cases along. Now, what was the other part of the question?
The lifetime appointment and how that impacts being a judge.
Well, at this point in my life, I just think the lifetime appointment is the best thing that ever happened since the invention of the wheel. Because it has, seriously, it has a tremendous advantage in that a judge can apply the law in a way that he or she thinks is right and never have to worry about what the electoral constituency might think about it. Mm-hmm. And one can't help but think about the case of Judge Penny White, who suffered grievously because of a position she took in a death penalty case. Mm-hmm. I don't think she wrote the case. I think she concurred in it. And it wasn't a reversal of anything other than the penalty itself. So I think it's the freedom within the law to do what the law says you must do, and then not have to worry about any consequences. Your only worry is what the Court of Appeals will tell you, or what the Supreme Court might tell you. That I think it's that's so really important, the freedom to really decide. Otherwise, I just don't think some of the cases that were decided by white judges who ended segregation in this country, especially those at that time Fifth Circuit judges, they would never have had the freedom to do what they did, but for a lifetime appointment.
You mentioned your family and the impact of being a judge on your family. Tell us, I know you have 2 sons. Tell us a little bit about your family.
Okay, our oldest son is Odell Horton, Jr. He's a lawyer, and he worked first for the Attorney General's office in Nashville, Tennessee. Then he worked for the University of Tennessee's legal department and ultimately headed up their legal office here in Memphis. He is now a vice chancellor at the UT Center for the Health Sciences. And I'm amazed at how fast he rose. Our other son is named Christopher. He lives in Atlanta, and he is greatly interested in computers. And he's a good politician, much better than Odell. And Christopher now works for the Board of Regents for the University System of Georgia, and he enjoys his job immensely.
There's a real irony to Odell Jr. being Assistant Chancellor or Vice Chancellor with the University of Tennessee after the story you've told us about Andy Holt.
It's amazing that he would come on, and after Dr. Johnson, who came on. Yes. It really is, but he's done well. He's a very good thinker, and he's not emotionally driven. To some extent, I am emotionally driven. He's not. He's cool.
Now, you have grandchildren, is that?
2. They're Odell's children. Odell 3, and Matthew, who is 2.
And Odell's wife is?
Ella. Her name is Ella Wesley Horton, and she's a graduate of UT Pharmacy School.
How did you feel about Odell Jr. becoming a lawyer, and what would you think if Odell III were to become a lawyer?
Well, I did not try to persuade him in any way. He made his own mind up. I didn't say it was good. I didn't say it was bad. I just took a position that you really need to do what you think will make you happiest in your life. And Odell went on to law school. Christopher went out to the Memphis State Law School for 2 summers when they had these little internship programs. He decided this is not a world for me, and he didn't want to go to law school, and he did not go. But he's done very well for working for the University of Georgia Board of Regents.
One of the things I thought was interesting when I clerked for you was that at that time, I think maybe Odell was finishing up at Morehouse.
Yes.
And then he went to law school at University of Tennessee.
Yes.
And the sort of the exposure that he got to the two very different worlds of education.
Yes, yes. And he worked hard. And one of the problems I think at that time was black students had a hard time getting on the law review. And that disappointed him a lot because he felt like he was a candidate. I told him, don't worry about it, keep working.
Judge, we're about to draw near the end of our time. The second to last question I want to ask you is there anything that you wish I had asked you about that I haven't, or that you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered?
Well, I think you might allow me to indicate to you that I think that people who serve as judges should never forget what it's like to practice law, and should be kind and compassionate, patient, and not embarrass lawyers in a courtroom, not embarrass their clients. And I think that if they show that kind of temperament and then study and try to do their best, they'll do all right.
I think repeatedly over the years the press has done stories about you and interviews with you, and almost the first thing that every lawyer who's asked about you as a judge says is that you were extremely fair and extremely patient.
Yes. In fact, some lawyers said that's why it took me so long to try cases. I was too nice.
You can't please everybody, Judge.
Right.
Judge, tell me, what do you think? You've been in public service now since at least 1962 and perhaps before that. Tell me what you think of as your greatest accomplishment in the years of your professional career.
I think demonstrating to the community that a judge who is black can be fair and impartial and serve his community well in the law.
Thank you, Judge. I think you've done that. Thank you for this interview.
And thank you for interviewing me.
You're welcome.
Right.